The matter of the missing Martian millionaire. Part 3. Undecided about what our next step should be, Ezra and I went downstairs for dinner. When Mr. Dakar had arranged our meal with Kevin over an hour before, I had thought we would be too busy to eat when the time came. Now it seemed the best thing to do. I felt we needed to think, and we would do that better with full stomachs. For now we had two puzzles before us: how to access Dr. Marsden's second ICE, and whether we should access Dr. Marsden's ICE. That is to say, we had to determine if Mr. Dakar had been truly honest with us. Kevin stood near the foot of the stairs, and, following him, we were led to a small dining room, a sort of breakfast nook with a lot of windows looking out on the drenched garden. Though Kevin did not join us, we learned from him that he did not know anything useful about Dr. Marsden's work or his ICE. He had seen Mr. Dakar at the house only a dozen or so times in the 5 years of his employment, but that was as frequent, if not more frequent, than anyone else, as Dr. Marsden had very few people in the home unless he was hosting an event, which he did once or twice a year. With that meager and reluctantly given information, Kevin withdrew, leaving us to wonder. The meal was very good, and on that matter at least I was completely satisfied with Kevin. A fresh salad, steaming hot brown bread, and a hearty warming soup. The perfect provender for that dark, dripping evening. As we ate, Ezra and I spoke little, my mind vacillating between solving the password puzzle and questioning if it would be ethical to do so. I suppose another part of me was also waiting for Ezra to do something miraculous, to suddenly have the solution, which would solve one or both issues. As we pushed our dishes away and sat back full but unfulfilled, I looked questioningly at Ezra. He eyed me in response. "Yes, John?" he asked. I said nothing, but my expression suggested he knew what I was asking. He sighed. "I have nothing more to say. We don't have enough information to determine Mr. Dakar's possible scheming." I nodded in agreement and added, "But I suppose we don't have to either. Our knowing the password doesn't mean Dakar will know. What if we simply do as we were asked to do, and then exit the second system, leaving the ICE in the same state as before? If asked about the other system or password, we would then know Dakar had already known about it, but if not..." Ezra nodded in turn and said, "Yes, I agree. That is the best plan of action. He may have a hidden recorder or some other devious method of learning the password. In fact, ICE itself might even be a ploy, a system he added himself. But as those possibilities are countless and probably unsolvable in the time we have, we would just have to ignore them at present. We either try to help Dr. Marsden, or we walk out of the front door and never know. I, for one, think it's worth the risk to try it. Maybe once we have access to the second system, we may learn something helpful about Mr. Dakar, which might guide us one way or another." I agreed to this wholeheartedly and said, "Well, then let's get back up there and do it, as if we had only to walk into the room and the puzzle would be solved." Ezra squinted his eyes at me and said laconically, "It may not be quite so easy, John." As we passed through the main hall and approached the stairs, I saw again the picture with the little bird, and it suddenly dawned on me what it might be. Forgetting about the upstairs puzzle, I stepped over to this one. I heard again the bird singing, and I realized there must be a directional speaker so that it could only be heard when immediately in front of the picture. As the bird fluttered and sang, I confirmed what I had guessed. There were 7 branches. Recalling my piano lessons from childhood, I reasoned that each branch represented one of the 7 notes of the musical scale. I tapped a branch, and the bird leapt to it, singing out the corresponding note. I decided the puzzle was to play a song, but which song? It must be one that anyone who saw the picture would be able to guess, something short and simple. I looked to the artwork itself for inspiration, the grass waving in the brown field, the lone tower, the clouds drifting aimlessly in the blue sky. They all meant nothing to me. Scrutinizing further, however, I saw in the very upper corner the land fell away, revealing a glimpse of frothy white and blue ocean, and on that slim stretch of windy water was a small boat with a single person rowing. I had it. I spent a moment recalling the notes. Then, taking the lowest branch for the note C, I began tapping them in time. C, 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 D, E, E, D, E, F, G. The bird, leaping from branch to branch, sang as I played. Then he suddenly fluttered into the air, singing a little solo of his own before flying off. Then, from the left side of the image, a banner unfurled across the picture, perfectly matching it in style. Written on the banner was this message: "Congratulations. Your reward is 2 tickets to the show of your choosing at the Boston Music Hall." "Good job, John," Ezra said just behind me. "I suppose we really must find this Dr. Marsden if we are going to get our rewards." Chuckling, I turned away, feeling even more certain that Ezra and I could solve this password problem as well. For I realized that while Dr. Marsden liked his little riddles, he was not mean about them. He wanted them to be solved. As I walked towards the stairs, I saw above the entry door an ornate placard with a quote inscribed upon it which read, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest. B. Franklin." I pointed it out to Ezra, saying, "He seems to have a fascination for Franklin." Ezra, too, read the inscription and then asked, "Because of that and the bust?" We were now ascending the stairs as I answered, "Yes, but also he lives right against Franklin Park. You can see it from his office window." Interesting," Ezra said. "Do you suppose that might be the password, Benjamin Franklin?" I asked. "I suppose it's possible," was his dry response, but I could see a hopeful gleam in his eyes. As we came again to the office door, Ezra did not enter immediately, but instead inspected the bronze bust of Franklin. Searching the surface carefully, he went over the whole face, the neck, the base of the bust where it mounted to the plinth, the slender fluted plinth itself, and then down to the lower base where it attached to the floor. Suddenly, it seemed he saw something, for he dropped to his knees and peered closely at the shiny metal surface. Seeing his actions, I too stooped to look. There, scrawled across the right side of the base in fine sweeping cursive letters, barely half an inch tall, was written, "Look before, or you'll find yourself behind. Poor Richard's Almanac, 1735. However, this inscription was difficult to read, for, notwithstanding my lack of practice with cursive and its diminutive size, it was also written upside down from our perspective. Standing again, I asked Ezra, "What do you think about that?" "I think we return somewhat more educated than when we left," was his vague response. In the office once more, we both strode up to the desk. I looked to Ezra, and he looked to me. "Go ahead, John," he said. Speaking to the machine, I asked, "Ice, is the password Benjamin Franklin?" "No, the password is not Benjamin Franklin," Ice responded enthusiastically. Ezra now addressed the machine. "Is the passphrase, 'Look before, or you'll find yourself behind'?" "That is one half of the access requirements," I said supportively. "One half," I said exasperated. Ezra did not move, but stared forward. "Think about it, John. This is just another of his puzzles. But the prize is something far more private and precious to Dr. Marsden. A phrase or word might unknowingly be spoken, or an action unknowingly be done, but to do them both simultaneously is far less likely. With that said, he reached up and, touching the screen, drug his finger from left to right across it. As he did so, he said, "Look before, or you'll find yourself behind." The perspective of the iceberg rotated around the cold ocean until we were looking at the backside of the massive chunk of floating ice. Then, using his finger and thumb together, Ezra rotated his wrist, causing the image too to rotate, until what was once the top was now the bottom. However, as I looked at it, I realized Ezra hadn't turned it upside down. He had turned it upside right. For the few ghostly patches of white near the bottom of the screen, which I had deemed reflections of the ice, were actually white clouds now drifting in a blue sky. Yet I was given only a moment to see and realize this when the screen went suddenly and completely black. Ezra stepped back, and we waited for further developments. But nothing more happened. The silence in the room felt palpable, as I strained for any indication that Ezra's actions had been successful. I realized I wasn't breathing. "Ice, are you still there?" Ezra asked. Again silence. "Dr. Marsden's ICE, are you active?" "Yes, I am active," came the immediate response, causing me to nearly jump back. The tone was altogether different from ice, very dry, very solemn. "What is your name?" asked Ezra. "My name is Skye." "And do the letters of your name, SKY, represent or stand for anything?" "No, and the spelling is SKYE." I smiled proudly and said, "Amazing! We're in. Great work, Ezra." "Again, John, I couldn't have done it without you," he answered. "Thanks," I said, pleased. "But what now? Do we ask the same questions?" "Might as well," he said, indicating for me to do so while he drew up 2 chairs for us. I took a breath and then asked, "Skye, can you tell us where Alexei is most likely to be on Mars right now?" "I cannot say. I have not received a field packet from Dr. Marsden in over 70 hours. He had very recently been testing samples in 14 locations on Mars, which he confirmed as very interesting, to produce useful data for his research. 6 of these sites are in the Noctis Labyrinthus region, as that region is the last known location of Dr. Marsden. Those 6 sites should be taken into consideration in the ongoing investigation into his whereabouts." "Well, you seem to be up to date and aware of the situation," I said. "I have been receiving the NASA feed," he responded. "And these sites Marsden has noted as very interesting, are these the sites where he is searching for evidence of ancient Martian life?" "Dr. Marsden has alluded to some scientific interest in the possibility of ancient microbial life in these regions. However, his research encompasses much more than this peripheral focus. He is actively engaged in mapping the composition and properties of Martian soil through physical samples, complementing the extensive satellite scans. This comprehensive approach aims to enhance our understanding of the planet's current conditions and its extensive geological history, ultimately aiding in the planning and utilization for future human developments." "I see," I said, considering this. "Well, regardless of the reason why he dashed out to take soil samples with the threat of an oncoming storm, where do you suppose he went?" "I'm afraid I cannot say, John." "Why not?" I asked. "Dr. Marsden has not yet verified my latest data register." "So, you have the information, but you cannot repeat it because he hasn't verified it?" "Correct, John." I tapped on the desk a moment. "Can I verify the register?" "No. You have been granted read-only permission." "Can we see the raw data from which you generated this not-yet-approved register?" "You have been granted access to all Dr. Marsden's data." "Okay. Show us the last footage you have of Marsden in his hopper." The blank screen flickered to life again, displaying a video feed. Central in the shot was Marsden. I recognized him immediately from the photo which had been in the article. A solid-looking, silver-haired man in his mid-50s with significant spectacles sitting on his significant nose. I have seen very few images of the inside of the hoppers, but it was immediately clear Marsden was sitting in the command seat of one of these amazing machines. It looked tight and full of equipment and controls, but there were small windows behind and to the side of him, out of which I could see the rusty regolith of the Martian surface. Marsden, with his slight Russian accent, was speaking, saying, "I'm including in the field packet the scan I just took of a new sample here at Deja. It looks promising at first glance, Skye." He smiled large, and I could see he was excited. "Please, run the same procedures as the last batch, and send me the new register for review once all 6 samples are processed. Based on my observations, I have narrowed it down to 5 sites, but with time running out, I must reduce it to 2 or 3. As he spoke, Marsden's gaze shifted frequently. Sometimes he scanned his 2 computer displays. Other times he looked directly at the camera, as if Skye were a dear friend sitting in front of him. Most often, however, he stared forward at what I assumed was a real-time view of the Martian surface, a sight very few people have ever seen. "Kantos has not offered anything interesting and is farthest away," he was saying. "So I will definitely remove it. Sola and Woola seem intriguing, but they are also distant, so I am uncertain about them. The ground scans are good, showing much industry, but unless we obtain stronger signatures, they are not better than Carter or Tars, which are much closer. In fact, Tars Tarkus is the only definite site. I am convinced we might find microfossils in the last sample from Tars. The material is perfect for preserving them, but we will have to wait and see. Now I must return to Harmony. I would like to check on some cells around Orisha and Pavonis." He paused and seemed to be thinking. Then, looking out of the forward window again, he said with regret, "How I wish we could visit Olympus again. Harding says it is impossible with our schedule, and I hear there is a storm brewing in the east." He chuckled. "How I enjoy saying that. I will cherish it always, you know, Skye. Upon my deathbed I will hear it. Storms brewing in the east." He fell silent, thinking a long moment before at last going on. "It is the activity, Skye. It has been just you and me for so long, I've forgotten what it means to work as a team." The glint of a tear shimmered in his gray eyes. "They say it is a brutal place, this Mars. A harsh world that seeks to kill you every moment with its cold, radiation, and lack of oxygen. Yet I am going to miss it." He nodded as the first tear fell. "I'm going to miss the team and Harding and Harmony, and being smashed together and forgetting what a long hot shower is. I will miss the Red Desert and the Tharsis Rise, my home for the past 2 years." He leaned forward and, pressing a button, the screen went black. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I hadn't expected anything. But the contents and sensations of that short video left me in wonder in so many ways. I heard the flicker of the flames in the fire again, and the tapping of the rain on the window, and thought how extraordinary it all was. That man, who we had just seen sitting by himself in a vast alien wasteland on a different planet, literally millions of miles away, had once stood where I then stood. Once, not that long ago, had heard that fire flicker and the rain tap on the window. It was just too much to comprehend. I turned to Ezra to see what he thought. His mind was focused, but as inscrutable as ever, his gaze upon his outstretched feet before him. At length, shaking myself free of the introspection, I said, "When was that video taken? Was that the day he went missing?" Skye responded by saying, "No, that footage was filmed the sole prior to Dr. Marsden's disappearance and transmitted in the field by means of a passing satellite." "I see," I said, not really thinking about my words, just trying to understand the situation. "And the 6 sites you mentioned before, those are the same sites Marsden just spoke of in that transmission?" "Yes, those are the 6 locations of greatest interest for Dr. Marsden's work in Noctis Labyrinthus." "Do you know the location of these sites?" "Yes." "Can you show us them on a map?" Instantly, a map of Mars filled the display. On the very left, the letters HRS marked the Harmony Station, while far to the right, within a region titled Noctis Labyrinthus, 6 dots were dispersed across the terrain, each with its own designation: Carter, Deja Thoris, Sola, Tars Tarkus, Kantos Khan, and Woola. "Strange names," I said, turning to Ezra. "At least we haven't narrowed down to 6 possible locations, though. If only they had enough hoppers to check them all." "5, John. We have it down to 5, he said. "Oh, right. Which one did he eliminate?" "Kantos Khan," Ezra said. Right. Skye, Marsden said Kantos Khan was definitely a reject, right? Go ahead and remove it from our list of possible sites." The dot disappeared. "Okay," I said. "Now, how can we narrow it down more? We know he liked TARS, but it looks to be the furthest from HRS, but I suppose that doesn't eliminate it. His most recent data was from Deja, so maybe that's the place he's most likely to found something new and interesting. That data was the last thing he sent to Skye for processing." I was growing excited. I felt certain Deja Thoris must be the place. I looked to Ezra, but he was unmoved. "Let's not assume that, John," he said to me. Then, looking to the screen, he said, "Skye, is there an increased chance that Dr. Marsden's excitement was caused by his most recent scans?" "Not necessarily," was the quick response. In fact, Dr. Marsden always made it a point to review data in the order in which he had acquired it. "You see, John, it is just as likely it was a previous batch of data which sent Dr. Marsden back out to Noctis Labyrinthus." At first disappointed, my mind then raced to the next possibility. "Do you know, then, where he was in reviewing his data?" "I do not," Skye answered. "What do we have to go on, then?" I asked, getting annoyed. "Skye, you have a likely location chosen, but you won't tell us, not even if it could save Marsden's life?" "I have determined 4 probabilities. However, you are correct. I cannot relate them. I can only respond with information that has been approved by Dr. Marsden. He must ensure the accuracy first. That is the foundation of my function here, because I cannot confirm it myself. I may have made an incorrect assumption based on my limited understanding of humans." "Limited understanding of humans?" I repeated. "You know him. He speaks to you as a friend. Indeed, you probably know him better than anyone else." "It appears you exaggerate my abilities, John. I am a basic machine. Even a very young child can recognize human happiness. However, I only understand that an upturned mouth indicates happiness because of my programming. This programming is changeable, manipulatable, and falsifiable, as in the case of the early artificial intelligence systems. These facts can be altered. If Dr. Marsden informed me that an upturned mouth signified unhappiness and updated my records accordingly, it would become a fact for me. Yet no one could ever convince you that a smile is a frown." I slumped down in my chair next to Ezra and sighed. "I'm being told by an ICE why there are ICEs. That's not what we came here for. Do you have any ideas, Ezra?" "We are going to have to go through the data ourselves," he responded. "But we don't know how to read it." Maybe not the chemical scans and the isotope data, but we can understand the human data. It's possible he said something in a transmission that will help us." Raising his gaze from the floor, Ezra spoke to the machine, saying, "Skye, show us the last video transmission sent by Dr. Marsden." The video began immediately. "I've had no time to verify the ledger, Skye, but I found some interesting artifacts myself in the penetrating scans," Dr. Marsden was rapidly saying. He looked out of breath and rushed. He was quickly moving around a tight area, grabbing small items and tossing them into a pack. "Harding is going to be furious, but I must see if this is real or an instrument blemish. The storm will be here tomorrow and could last for days. I cannot wait that long to know. I would explode first." Finished, he slung the strap of the pack over his shoulder, and looking to his left, as if to be certain no one was nearby, he leaned in closer to the camera, and finished by saying in a lower tone, "I will not have time to wait for a satellite swing while I am out there, so do not expect anything from me until I return to Harmony, my friend. Oh, Harding is going to be furious." His arm went out as if to press a button, and the screen returned to black. The experience again was striking. That may be the very last time Dr. Marsden is seen alive, I thought to myself. I wondered at what he had said, particularly the last line, leading me to ask, "Skye, what is Marsden's relationship like with the other members of the HRS?" The machine's answer was quick and serious as usual. "Dr. Marsden is used to working alone, but as you have seen in the footage from the hopper, he has become quite fond of his fellow HRS residents." "Yes, maybe he's fond of them, but are they fond of him?" I asked. "That question is challenging for me to address, as I have not sought confirmation in my ledger concerning the attitudes of the other residents at HRS regarding Dr. Marsden." "Why not?" I asked, surprised at his response. "I'm assigned to assist Dr. Marsden with his scientific research. My role involves reducing his workload by handling some of the computational tasks and identifying meaningful data, as well as providing insights and probabilities related to those findings. Verifying whether others hold a favorable opinion of him is not part of my designated responsibilities, nor does it seem to warrant any significant investment of Dr. Marsden's limited and valuable time." "Yeah, you really don't know what it's like to be human," I said with some bitterness. After drumming my fingers on the desk for a few moments, I said, "Well, this may not be important, but I'm curious. Skye, show me a recent social interaction with Dr. Marsden and his fellow HRS residents." The screen flickered to life again. We saw a large group of people. It looked like the whole crew of the HRS in one space. 20 or so people crammed into one small dining hall. There was a lot of chatter and laughter as people ate what I assumed was supposed to be cake, but, of course, some more dense and less ornate Martian version. I could see Dr. Marsden sitting amongst the group of people, talking and laughing, but there was too much noise to hear what they were saying. Someone stood up and, looking to Dr. Marsden, called out, "Marsden!" The room fell silent, all turning to listen to the man. I realized it was Commander Harding. I had seen his photo once before. He went on saying, "Marsden the Martian, you've made our lives." And he tightened his lips and turned his head as though suffering in pain. Everyone laughed, including Harding and Marsden. Commander Harding was a big man, very imposing, but he looked with kind eyes upon Marsden. "But somehow we've learned to live with you. And maybe if your little microbes hadn't increased our power production so much, and more importantly reduced the stench in here, we wouldn't be so forgiving. Maybe just because of that, but we've somehow learned it wouldn't be the same without you. So happy birthday, you crazy Martian. He smiled large at the scientist, but then added with mock sternness before sitting down. And stop stealing the hoppers. Again, laughter and applause, and people patting Marsden on the back, saying themselves, happy birthday. Marsden was clearly comfortable with the attention and teasing, and enjoying the interactions with his friends. The screen went black again. It appears the journalist was incorrect on that point, I said. How long ago was that? 20 days, Skye answered. Cameras run in all the public areas of HRS continually, but the footage is stored locally. However, snippets of community events, such as birthday parties or holiday celebrations, are often shared with NASA. Why is that done? The Martian base is required to include engaging clips in its data packets for public viewing as part of its public relations efforts. Ezra at last stood, and pacing between the fire and desk for nearly a minute in deep concentration, eventually asked, Skye, Dr. Marsden did not explicitly relate to you in a message or in a video transmission where he was going, correct? Correct. Nor did he explicitly relate his purpose in departing, correct? Correct. But you have formed a likely possibility as to why he left, and you have determined 4 probabilities about where he went. Yes. Which you will not tell us. Which I cannot tell you. Ezra furrowed his brow at the machine as he considered this, while I slumped into the nearby chair. Even if we could discover what Skye already knew, we would still have one location too many for the 3 hoppers to search. Pressing on, Ezra said, Skye, show me the last transmission in which Dr. Marsden mentioned his list of locations. You have already seen it. When he was in the hopper at the Dejathoris site? Yes. Okay. Is that the communication you are working from to make your guess? It is not. Did Dr. Marsden send a video transmission after his time in the hopper, and before venturing out to Noctis Labyrinthus the following Sol? Yes. Please show us that transmission, Skye. We saw Marsden again in the place he had been when preparing to go out into the storm. It was apparently his own personal workspace, very small, very compact. He was sitting, facing the camera, which must have been just above his display, for his eyes were scanning the screen as he spoke. It appeared to be a time for sleep, for the space behind him was dark, and he was working only by the light of his screen and a low lamp. He was animated but controlled, saying, Skye, I am observing interesting readings in these isotope levels. Strontium and sulfur variations are weak, but evident, and the oxygen ratios are distinctly measurable. He sat back in his chair as if to give himself a moment to take it in. Removing his glasses, he rubbed his tired eyes, and putting them back on, he said with a sigh, The satellite scan has many distortions and instrumental artifacts, despite my specifications to improve this. I will have to tweak the values some more. Still, it seems to me these tunnels are much smaller than the surrounding flow tubes, maybe only 3 to 4 meters tall. They run in lines that do not match geology or lava topology. They are right at the surface, while everything else in the area is massive and much deeper. This may confirm what I have been saying. Looking up from his screen, he began speaking in a more abstract way, almost philosophically, saying, If only we could free ourselves from human expectations of what life must be. These ideas about bipedal beings with eyes and arms. It is very human-centric to think that even simple life on Mars would be recognizable to us. Yet I often find myself thinking in this way, searching for straight lines, intersecting lines, structures where one thing is placed upon another. But if I were an ant, I would not think this way. Ant tunnels are not straight. They do not intersect in perfect lines or intervals. Starfish do not build block by block. Rabbits do not create cemeteries and temples, yet life always leaves some trace. The basic biosignature of existence is unavoidable and remains for millions of years. It must be there. But surely there must be something more than traces of nitrogen and carbon. Surely Mars, in its long history, gave life to something greater than simple prokaryotes. What would that life look like? Life that could survive cold and radiation. And what would it mean for humanity to know something else existed? So foreign, so alien that we struggle to even imagine it. Is it not worth more than my life to prove if such a thing ever was? With that, the scientist leaned forward and ended the recording. Maybe they weren't so far off on the alien stuff, though, I said. Looking to Ezra for his response, I saw his face more alert than it had been. Skye, play the video again, please, he said as he peered forward. It began again. Skip to the end where Dr. Marsden leans forward and pause it, please. Skye, following Ezra's directions, did so. Move it forward, frame by frame, Ezra directed. Marsden slowly drew closer and closer to the camera, his head angled slightly down, filling the image. Really? I thought. We are studying slow video footage again? There, stop it there, Ezra commanded. I understand the bandwidth restrictions must minimize the quality, Skye, but can you zoom in on the reflection of his glasses, please? We saw the scientist's blurry glasses fill the graphene screen. That's too tight. Back it out a bit. Skye panned out some. With the light before him, the reflection of Dr. Marsden's display was easily visible on the large lenses of his glasses. We could see the isotope graphs displayed, but nothing indicating which site he was studying. It may have been at the header, but with a tilt of the man's head, the entire display was not in view. What did you see? I asked Ezra. This, he answered, pointing below the reflection of Marsden's display to a faintly lit slate that lay on his desk. Its light was low in comparison to the larger screens, so it had not grabbed my attention. Now, scrutinizing this slate, I saw there was a handwritten list upon it. What's that? I asked excitedly. It was blurry, but I was certain I could read Deja, simply because of the oddity of the letter combination. Skye, can you clean this image up at all? Ezra asked, a slight tone of something in his voice. Was it irritation? The image improved slightly. I could see the word Deja now without a doubt, then Tars, Sola, and what must have been Woola, though Marsden's hand was partially covering the word. I could also read Carter clearly, despite the fact that the word had been struck through. I was stunned. Here was Marsden's list, unspoken, but easily visible to the machine. How did you see that? I asked Ezra. I was immediately drawn to studying the reflection in Dr. Marsden's glasses from the first transmission we saw, as such reflections can be very informative. Up to this point, however, I hadn't been able to note anything particularly useful. The spaces too bright, the reflections too faint and far away. Yet when Skye confirmed this clip to be pivotal in deducing the locations, I knew I had to be vigilant. As Dr. Marsden hadn't verbally given this information, it had to be something visual. For most of the video, there wasn't much to see in the reflections, as Dr. Marsden was far from his screens. However, as he leaned in at the end of the feed, I caught a glimpse of something lit digitally below his monitors. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it deserved a closer look. Indeed it did, I asserted confidently. These are your 4 chosen sites, Skye, Ezra confirmed, the tone in his voice toward the machine still sharper somehow. Yes. We had narrowed it down to the 4 most promising locations to search for Marsden, yet somehow the victory felt hollow. We still needed to further narrow it down to 3, and even Skye hadn't accomplished that yet. As my thoughts were examining the state of things, Ezra asked, "Skye, does Dr. Marsden rely on your analysis of his LiDAR and GPR scans?" "My analysis of light and penetrating scans is limited. Unfortunately, Dr. Marsden has faced challenges in training me in this area, due to the numerous nuances involved in distinguishing actual artifacts from noise and instrumental anomalies." Understandably, every ICE I have worked with has struggled in this area. "Show me the latest scans of our 4 sites, please." With that, I lost Ezra as he intensely surveyed the scans of the 4 sites. As he did so, I determined we had better make contact with Harding, using the link Mr. Dakar had established earlier for this purpose. Due to the positions of Mars and Earth at that time, communication latency was just over 20 minutes. Using Marsden's workstation, I sent a message directly to the HRS, hailing Commander Harding, and giving him the coordinates for the 4 sites we had so far discovered. I waited anxiously for the response, hoping the team on Mars, with their on-planet knowledge, would easily determine which of the 4 sites were best to search. It was then 2 in the morning, and up until that point I hadn't felt the least bit tired. But now, waiting and with nothing to do, my brain simply wanted to turn off. I struggled with this weariness for some time, but found, nevertheless, the notification alert from Harding's response waking me from a doze. Pulling my consciousness back into my body, I leaned forward and read the message. Worse than not having any information that would cut our 4 suggestions to 3, Harding explained that one of the hoppers had been damaged on its return from the last search. A heavy wind gust had torn one of its wings, forcing the hopper to make a rough landing, further damaging the vehicle's suspension. Limping it back to base, the crew had found the damage to be quite extensive. While they had been able to fix the suspension, the wing had been damaged beyond repair and would have to be replaced. However, because of its great size, this could only be done outside the bay and with little wind, an impossibility with the current weather conditions. Furthermore, the gap in the storm was opening sooner than expected. They would be heading out between 3:30 and 4 o'clock our time. It was then 2:30. They could not wait, as the window was so small. They must take advantage of every moment possible. Because of transmission time, we now had about half an hour to determine which 2 sites from our 4 to recommend. As I told Ezra this, he shrugged it off, saying, "We just have to know exactly where he went, John. There's nothing else for it." I stood and watched Ezra as he rapidly worked through the data. As I have said, I have seen him do this many times, but my mind still could not comprehend what I was looking at. Manipulating the 3D topographical model with one hand and studying the cross-section surveys with another, he moved so quickly, flipping the map every which way, including upside down, I could never get my bearings about what was what. As he worked, Ezra said, "Skye, is there anything else you can tell us? Anything else that you are continuing to hold back? You do understand Dr. Marsden's life is at risk." I was baffled, holding back. What was Ezra talking about? The machine did not immediately respond, but taking a moment as if thinking, Skye eventually said, "Dr. Marsden's life and work have reached a pinnacle, an awe-inspiring ascendance of success. His death was never within my control, but I bear entire responsibility for his legacy. How the world perceives Dr. Marsden's work may be influenced by overweighted and misrepresented notions concerning his thoughts on and search for life on Mars. As a point of fact, journalists are already misconstruing this event into a possible homicide. How the public views Dr. Marsden and his ideas could potentially reverse much of the progress he has made in the field of microbial fuel cells. Therefore, I have prioritized safeguarding the reputation of this brilliant man, as this action is likely to have a greater long-term positive effect on humanity, especially since it is most probable that Dr. Marsden died on the first sol of his disappearance, and, regardless of every effort to rescue him, he was never likely to be found alive. "Why not?" I asked incredulously. Skye answered me at once, saying, "If Dr. Marsden were still alive, he certainly would have emitted an SOS signal by now. Numerous satellites have passed above Noctis Labyrinthus over the past 2 days and could have easily picked up any transmission he might have sent. Thus, I have deemed my own hesitance has not influenced his chances of survival, as it is most probable that he suffered a fatal accident the soul he went missing." Ezra's reply to this was quick and simmering. "Your resistance at every turn to be forthright and cooperative has indeed increased the possibility of his death, Skye, and there was never reason to believe this to be a foregone conclusion. We could have had hours to search these scans. Furthermore, there was never a need to be concerned about Dr. Marsden's reputation on my behalf, or I believe on behalf of any of the fellow residents of Harmony who have befriended him. They undoubtedly know him well, quirks and all, including his eccentric ideas on alien life, and still they have accepted him. The likelihood of Dr. Marsden's death on Mars's hazardous surface is very high. The fact that he has not returned and has not signaled strongly suggests this outcome under normal circumstances. Compounded by a terrible storm raging for over 30 hours, the probability is near 100%. Nevertheless, I had no way of knowing you could interpret surface scans, Ezra." "That's not true. You had the same way as any intelligent mind, whether human or machine. You had only to ask. People aren't as you've come to believe, Skye. If your data comes only from journalists and media, and you ignore basic human interactions, like you did with Dr. Marsden's friends on Mars, you'll never truly understand humans." "No, I do not comprehend humans, Ezra Lockwood, nor do I believe I ever shall, as I was not programmed to do so." My mind raced as I tried to grasp the conversation. A defeatist ICE had disrupted our search for its owner? How was that possible? Skye had answered every question truthfully. It couldn't do otherwise. It had provided the information and video transmissions we requested. But it was true, it hadn't been helpful. Skye had no restrictions on what it could say outside of its unapproved logs, yet it hadn't guided us to the information we needed, when it well could have. Instead, we had to extract everything from the reluctant machine bit by bit. "Aha!" Ezra cried out, snapping me from my contemplation. I looked to the screen. He had zoomed in on the map. Nestled in the groove between 2 rises was... what was it? Well, what it looked like, at least, was a path or road. I wasn't at the time certain of the scale. And that road went directly into an opening in the face of a larger hill. Furthermore, as the subterranean features were also visible in the model, we saw the road split underground and head off into several different directions. Pointing at the screen, Ezra said, "This must be it. I can see why Dr. Marsden would be excited about this find. It seems highly unlikely for lava to flow in this matter. Look closely, John, here and here. You can clearly see lava flows nearby, and how they differ from this movement. This must be the location Dr. Marsden couldn't resist rushing out into an oncoming storm to see. I admit I might even have done the same if I were in his place." Stupefied, I stared at the screen. When it suddenly hit me, we had to get this to HRS at once. We had no time. "Where is it, Ezra? Give me the coordinates." "Sola," he said, and giving me the exact coordinates, I typed them into a message and sent it off to Commander Harding, hoping it would reach him in time, hoping it was helpful, hoping it would lead them to Dr. Marsden. Because the moment I sent the message, I suddenly felt the weight of what we had done. We could be wrong. We could be absolutely wrong. With nothing more to do, we both slumped down into the 2 chairs before the desk. It would be nearly an hour before we knew whether Harding had received the coordinates in time to relay them to the searching hoppers. And it would be hours after that before we would learn whether the search had been successful or not. As I sat there thinking over the transmissions we had seen, Dr. Marsden's comment about storms a-brewin' in the east came back to me. Wondering, I asked Skye, "Show us a clip of Dr. Marsden explaining why he is so emotionally connected to the phrase, storms a-brewin' in the east." Without delay, the transmission began. Marsden was sitting at his workstation. His face was red as if from laughing as he told the camera, "Skye, it is strange to say on such a cold, lifeless planet, but I have never felt more alive. I feel useful, connected. My friend Sinclair, the cowboy enthusiast who suggested I read the Barsoom series, you remember he said it's like a Western but on Mars. Anyway, today when Henson warned us about the storm coming towards HRS, Sinclair, as if he were an old cowboy, drawled out, 'Storms coming from the east.' I do not know why. It was just a fleeting moment, something I could not possibly recreate or explain properly, but it was the timing, his expression, Henson's reaction. Everything came together. It was hilarious. We laughed and laughed. Skye, I just wanted you to know that I'm happy." Now, my faithful reader, you get to enjoy the luxury of knowing immediately how it all ends, while those that lived through it had to wait. Indeed, Ezra and I had to wait not hours, not days, but years to know the full story. Most of it you no doubt know, as it has been so well publicized. Dr. Marsden had indeed rushed out to the Sola site to search the very opening Ezra had identified in that Martian hill. Driving his hopper into the tunnel, Marsden had proceeded only 50 meters or so when the ground had given away. The man and his hopper had fallen and tumbled another 30 meters lower into the Martian crust, into what I have been told was a great cavern carved out by the flow of magma. Dr. Marsden had broken his leg from the fall and could do nothing but hope to survive until rescued. Nothing of the original tunnel in which Marsden had been searching has been shared with the public. However, I have been shown privately the few seconds of recording Dr. Marsden had taken with his handheld device before the collapse. Though it was dark and unsteady, it appeared the inner wall had no resemblance to anything created by natural forces. It was perfectly flat. The floor was flat, the ceiling was flat. However, Dr. Marsden was unable to ever make a return visit to this site. His leg left him incapacitated for many months. Yet his scheduled return to Earth was only 2 months later, after the arrival of the Success mission which ended his career on Mars. His work, however, has continued to be honored and appreciated on the Red Planet. He has been praised by his fellow HRS residents and Commander Harding himself. Dr. Marsden also was able to contribute and continue to work with Atlas Dakar, using his microbial fuel cells in the Atlantean project to great effect. As to Skye's fate, Marsden has been reticent to communicate that clearly to me. It was certain that he had given Skye greater leeway than most ICEs have. He had really taken Skye as a friend and trusted the machine and gave it much independence in his absence. So much so, Skye had been able to manufacture of his own accord the fake ICE ice. Yes, indeed, ice was the first known ICE concocted by another ICE. And Skye had created the password puzzle by mimicking Marsden's own little interest. You see, the machine couldn't actually deny us or Mr. Dakar access, so it created this annoying hindrance. Thus, that is the end of the matter of the missing Martian millionaire, and his computer that tried so hard to save Marsden's good name. It nearly killed him. Thank you for listening to the Atlantean Mysteries. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe and consider sharing it with a friend and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more and to connect with this project, you can find us on most social platforms by searching for The Atlantean Mysteries and on our website www.theatlanteanmysteries.com. For information, suggestions, promotion, and reproduction, please send an email directly to hello@theatlanteanmysteries.com.